It's 10 o'clock, so I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Board of Supervisors on April 26, 2013, and ask you to stand for a moment of silence. Just keep doing that for a while. All right, Maria, could you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we're here for one timed item. This item is A, discussion of access to law enforcement information systems, and B, discussion and consideration of options for this board to provide efficient cooperative access to citizens by all law enforcement agencies to ensure public safety. And I'd like to begin by stating the obvious that there are 3 board members present, which means that any decision might have to be unanimous. I'd also like to state that this board is very much aware the sheriff is a constitutional officer and that we are not in a position to tell the sheriff how to do law enforcement. I'd like to suggest that there's a pretty passionate crowd here. Maybe just a show of hands. How many of you believe in the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of California? So we have more in common than we realize. The ground rules would be that we focus on the issue at hand. Many of the things that we hear are outside of the Board of Supervisors' purview, and so we need to focus on what the Board of Supervisors, areas in Board of Supervisors' jurisdiction. This meeting was precipitated by a letter we received. This mic is cutting in and out. Anyway, this meeting was precipitated by a letter we received from the City of Lakeport that basically shared their concerns that public safety may be at risk because of some access to the law enforcement systems, and that the sheriff has provided a temporary solution, but it's not, as they stated in their letter, they don't believe that it is an effective solution to the problem that they have in accessing the information for public safety. So I guess what the best thing to do at this point in time is just to hear from the sheriff, who I just gave a copy of the letter to. Frank, maybe you can just come up and just sort of set the stage for what actions have been taken and what you can share with the public at this point.
Good morning. I'm not exactly sure what the board is looking to do or accomplish here. I've just read the letter. My actions are part of my continuing efforts to control the dissemination of sensitive law enforcement information that is held in the custody of the sheriff's office, and it's my responsibility to control. This procedure of tightening the constraints on the RIMS, Report Information Management System, did not begin today or a week ago or a month ago. It began essentially the moment I took office. As the board is well aware, when I did take office, I did an immediate audit on the RIMS system because I had great concerns that there was a lot of information, police reports, personal information on members of the public that was out there that should not be out there.
Sheriff Rivera, can you stop for just a moment? You did ask a question, and I wanted to state the answer to that in my view, so that you could frame your response accordingly. The reason for this meeting is because of the letter of the City of Lakeport, and also there have been a number of things in the public that have the public concerned about public safety. So, so if we could just, mainly the purpose of this meeting is to get the information out on public safety, so folks know that.
Well, if you would just bear with me for a moment, I'd like to frame this so that you and the public are aware of what I'm doing as part of my position as the elected sheriff. So this control, auditing, monitoring of the rim system has been going on for quite a long time. There were many logins and passwords that were inappropriate. And unfortunately, even with my best efforts and the efforts of my staff, we're still finding situations that should not be occurring, and we address and correct them as we find them. On the 18th of this month, I received my latest update of how many logins and passwords are contained within RIMS that allow access to RIMS. That number was 225 people with access logins. I looked through that list and I made some determinations, and then I acted on those determinations in my capacity as sheriff. Now I'll turn my direction directly to the Lakeport Police Department. I read the letter that you just handed me a few moments ago, and essentially the letter states that we have cut off RIMS access to Lakeport, that we have breached the contract for dispatch services, and for those that do not know, the Lake County Sheriff's Office provides dispatch services under contract to the Lakeport Police Department. We continue to do so. And that my workaround for not providing access to the Lake County Sheriff's RIM system to Lakeport Police is inadequate. So, first of all, there's absolutely no public safety concerns involved in this. I dispute that, and I would like to hear, because I have yet to hear any specifics concerning that. Public safety and officer safety is a really nice buzzword to throw out there, but what are the facts, what are the circumstances, and exactly what are you alleging concerning public safety and the officer safety issue? Lakeport Police has 4 contractual obligations with the Lake County Sheriff's Office. I'm sure the board has seen it. It's available through public records, but essentially they are to provide dispatch services to the Lakeport Police Department. They're in attachment A of this document. I can go through them one by one, or I can paraphrase them, whatever you prefer.
My preference would be paraphrasing, but...
Okay. They're reasonably short. Receive and request for police services, dispatch city police to those requests accordingly. Well, we're doing that right now. As a matter of fact, I was listening to calls. There's a recent call nearby here where 2 Lakeport police officers were dispatched by our dispatch services. They were given all the information that was necessary for them to complete their job. It says monitor and receive, transmit radio communications for the city of Lakeport. Again, we're doing that. There's absolutely no reason to believe that we're not. And as a matter of fact, I was in my radio car listening to the patrol radio, and I heard several calls coming back and forth from Lakeport Police just this morning. Operate and maintain the city police wanted persons file. We have and continue to do that. There's no issue. It says provide police with access to statewide and nationwide crime computer networks upon request, i.e. CLETS and NCIC. We do that. When a Lakeport police officer requests information, what's called a 27 on an individual, we run the 27 and provide them that information. When they want a plate run from DMV, we run the plate and provide them that information. If they need criminal information from NCIC, we do that also. So to the extent that there's some allegation that I or the sheriff's office is in breach of contract, that's just simply not true. The contract is here, and it speaks for itself.
Right, well, and we're not really in a position to talk about the contract itself, but what the issue that we're hoping to understand in this special meeting is whether public safety is at risk, and you took action to limit access, or was it shut down access?
The access to RIMS was completely shut down, and let me just explain how this works. Lake County Sheriff's Office has its own RIMS system that's maintained by the Lake County Sheriff's Office, and information is put in there that's very sensitive, including information on child victims and other things that the general public would not want released to just anyone. And by the way, it is a crime to release it unless there's a right to know and a need to know. That's very clear. And that information, furthermore, is required by state law to be protected from release to individuals that don't have a right to know or need to know. The Lakeport Police Department also maintains its own RIMS system. I do not have access to that RIMS system, nor do I want access to that RIMS system, nor do I feel that I need access to that RIMS system. We have our own system that I do have access and control of. The way that this was set up through this dispatch contract, which by the way, this is not even mentioned in the contract, but it's a courtesy that I agree with because I believe that the Lakeport officers need it in order to complete their report, which is a ministerial task, not a public safety task, is that our CAD system, which stands for Computer Assisted Dispatch, records the calls for service that are issued to the Lakeport Police Department. That CAD system then loads it into RIMS, the Report Information Management System. And the purpose of allowing RIMS access to the Lakeport Police Department was for them, and this is a purpose that was acknowledged just a few days ago by the chief himself, was to allow them to access the CAD system so that when they got back to the station, they could use that information to complete their reports. And the chief also augmented that by saying that he uses the CAD system if there's a Public Records Act request and he needs to look through to see whatever his officers may have done or to comply with other ministerial tasks that he's required to do, and to monitor what his units are doing on a day-to-day basis. And I agree with all of that. That's certainly reasonable. I don't have any issue with it at all. The problem really stems from the fact that in giving access to the CAD, which isn't in the contract, but nonetheless has been historically done, and I have no intentions of discontinuing it, and they still have to this day. And I talked to my dispatch manager last night, and they're still receiving the necessary information from the CAD system. The problem really stems from having access to the entire RIM system in order just to access CAD. And we developed a workaround. There have been some glitches, but we still continue to provide them the information. According to my dispatch manager, I've been in constant contact with her and the assistant manager throughout this, and making sure that they are getting this very same information that they purportedly were accessing through our RIM system. Now, after having had several discussions 2 days ago with Chief Rasmussen and being absolutely assured that the only reason that he needed access, he and his officers, I should say, needed access to the RIM system was for CAD, and having been assured that his officers had not accessed CAD, I'm sorry, not accessed RIMS beyond CAD, and also being told by the chief that they didn't need any more than CAD, but still without explanation being held to task on why can't I have RIMS. Because my question to the chief was, well, if you can get your CAD information, which is what you're entitled to through a different source, then why do you need rims? That question remains unanswered up until this morning, up until today. But the day before yesterday, my curiosity being alerted, I began the process of running some audits, some specific audits, because it is a cumbersome task to audit this RIM system. You have to go into RIM's report and bounce back and forth between two separate operating systems. And then you have to put in the initials or the login of the individual who you want to look at to see what records they have accessed, and then you have to go back to RIMS and look specifically at those dates and times or at the person screen that they had accessed, and then go into the audit section of that part of the computer and figure out what they looked at, and from there it becomes a guessing game. Was it necessary? Was it not? With my officers, I have a pretty good idea. I know that what they're investigating, what they're doing, you know, why they would need to look at a specific individual, a specific picture, or a specific list of evidence. With an outside agency, it's a guessing game. But in any event, when I looked at this audit, what I discovered immediately was that in fact, the information that was given to me by Chief Rasmussen was misrepresented. That from January 1st, which is where I just limited it to a 4-month period, I started January 1st of 13 through April 24th, I believe was the date, or 23rd, that I ran the query. There have been hundreds of inquiries made by Lakeport police officers into into RIMS that had nothing to do with CAD. They were people screens, pictures, and other screens that I had been assured was not the case and should not be the case. Because again, I'm ultimately responsible.
So you're saying that you feel, you discovered that there was inappropriate access to RIMS?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Is it, have you, I guess and you know you're going to have to stop me if I'm crossing the line as a Board of Supervisor member, but I'm just curious, are you filing charges? Was it a crime that took place?
No, because frankly, I don't have any way to verify whether or not these accesses were legitimate, because these officers are not under my control. First of all, I can't open an internal affairs investigation into any of this because Lakeport Police is independent and I don't have any authority to open an internal affairs investigation.
So it's possible that Chief Rasmussen was mistaken, that they actually used more than the CAD system to do their jobs.
Well, Chief Rasmussen himself had 12 inquiries from January 1st through April 23rd.
Right, so it's possible, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it's possible that these were legitimate inquiries as opposed to...
Well, it's possible, except in one particular instance that I was looking at this, and again, you know, this is some of, you know, that's audit paperwork that I brought with me, just to give you some idea of the Herculean task of auditing these inquiries, because in, you know, hundreds of inquiries, and then you go to hundreds of other pages. You have to determine what computer terminal they came from, which is a totally separate inquiry. But I can speak to this. There was one particular inquiry that really troubled me, and that was this. It was, and I can't name names because there are POBAR protections involved here, so I won't do that. I'm not going to violate anybody's POBAR protections, but I can discuss it generally under the penal code, and I did research that last night. And this officer had accessed his wife, because when I looked, it was the same last name, and then I started seeing that there were several first names, not just the one that was confirmed by me, according to RIMS, to be his wife, and then changed certain information in that entry. Now that is wholly inappropriate, and I did bring that to the attention in an email that I wrote to Chief Rasmussen the night before last.
Because I want to get some clarity on because you're using this term a lot, and I just want to find out what really inappropriate means. Where are the rules for the use of rims, where can we access those? Because I know there's a difference between inappropriate. In fact, you said there were, your words exactly were many inappropriate uses, and then you followed that up by saying there was no way to verify what the use, what they were looking at, and if it was inappropriate or not. So
well, there is a way to verify it. It's very laborious and time consuming. You would have to bring in the individual and ask them, why were you looking at this particular report? Why were you looking at this particular person's screen? How does that tie into your law enforcement capacity? There's an absolute way of verifying. What I said, it's impossible for me to verify what Lakeport Police has done because I have no access and no authority.
Okay, and I misunderstood. I guess I thought you had already verified that because you did say it was inappropriate, so I assumed that.
Well, no, it is inappropriate to be running your wife.
You said many inappropriate.
Well, no,
hundreds.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, and let me clarify that. It's inappropriate that they be accessing this information at all. That wasn't the agreement.
Okay.
They had
rules for that.
Hang on just a second. If you allow me to finish, I'd be happy to explain to you, but if you're not going to listen, then we're not going to get anywhere.
Well, no, and yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what your answer is.
Well, then allow me to speak,
Yeah,
please.
continue.
The contract for dispatch services was structured, and not by me, by the previous administration, to allow RIMS access so that Lakeport Police could access CAD inquiries only. Any other access would be inappropriate, and there were hundreds of them. Therein comes the many statement. Now, you asked me another question, let me respond before I forget. This is all codified in Penal Code Section 13300 to 13305. Specifically, if you'll allow me to quote this in short, 13302 of the Penal Code. An employee of a local criminal justice agency who willingly furnishes a record or information obtained from a record to a person who is not authorized by law to receive the record or information is guilty of a misdemeanor. You want me to continue, or do you want to?
Why don't we, hold on a
Because I
second.
haven't heard when you said that had happened. So somebody did actually access records and then give them to somebody else? Is that what you're alleging?
The problem here is that we don't know what they've done, okay? And even to look at these records without a need to know or a right to know, which is under 11, excuse me, I'm working from memory because I don't have that here. I think it's 11075 of the Penal Code. You have to have a right to know first. That's the first hurdle, Supervisor. The second hurdle is a need to know. Both of those, not one or the other, both must be met before accessing this information.
So, Rob, excuse me, but let me interject here. An old saying in business is that when you start quoting contract language to each other, the relationship has pretty much gone sideways, right?
Fair enough.
So the question is, we have here a letter from Lakeport, and regardless of what the contract says, the issue around this is they're saying they need access to this system, and we'll hear from them in a moment. You're saying that inappropriate action took place, so therefore you shut off access, and you're allowing access to certain information that was in the contract. My question for you is there a way to sit at the table and figure out what it is they need beyond CAD and work up protocols so that this doesn't happen again? Is that why you shut off access in order for that to happen, or is it access just shut off forever?
No. Well, first of all, I have assurances that I'm relying on to tell you this from Chief Rasmussen, that he doesn't need access to RIMS beyond CAD access. That was the entire issue.
That's not what the letter says.
Well, I understand. I just read the letter this morning, but I mean,
We'll hear his version of it here.
I don't believe that they need access to RIMS. They have their own RIMS system.
Well, they
Now,
obviously
and by the way, I'm sorry, I don't mean to stop you, but by the way, there is an interoperability agreement between RIMS users, and with us, it's Clear Lake Police, City of Lakeport, LCSO, Calistoga Police, St. Helena Police, and there were maybe one or two others. And this interoperability agreement allows you to access RIMS through that agreement, but you have to go a different route, and the information is limited. And I'm not saying that in any particular case, if any officer, any law enforcement officer comes to me and says, we need information on this individual or this situation, or anything like that, even beyond the interoperability agreement, which provides for some access and some cross-use of RIMS between local agencies, which is, by the way, was set up because that's the proper procedure. Okay? I'm not saying if somebody comes to me and says that they need specific information, I'm going to deny them that information. I just like the opportunity to evaluate for myself whether or not it in fact meets the criteria of needs to know. Is it legitimate? But to have these passwords, these enormous amount of logins and passwords just out there, and then expect my staff and myself to continually, without the ability to reduce this, because realize this list of 255 people was reduced substantially already, and every time that I reduce it, there's always a bit of a dust up. The first dust up was the biggest one, but they continue. But I believe that they have alternatives that they should be exercising that are in place for a reason, like this interoperability agreement. They want to access our RIM system, they can do it, but they have to go through that system, and that system audits, and that system keeps track. And that's not something where I am taking personal responsibility for issuing passwords.
So if I sum up what you're saying, just to make sure I understand it, you're saying that you don't have, currently, the reason you had to shut it down is you don't have in place the ability to understand or know how the system's being used, and you would rather it go through a mechanism so the audit trail is clear.
Well, that's not the primary reason. The primary reason is this is too burdensome to continue to have these large amounts of sign-ins when they're absolutely unnecessary. We can take their need for CAD and satisfy that need through a system that doesn't require me to audit all these other things. And it makes it much more efficient.
Okay. Well, I want to follow up with your, maybe, to try to find a solution. It may be cumbersome for you to have that many people there, but it's no different than other counties that are much larger than ours that actually do it. And actually, Mendocino County, they allow all the cities to have RIMS access. In fact, right now they're waiting for DOJ approval to allow the tribal police in Hopland to be able to have RIMS access as well. So it's not cumbersome for others, and I'm wondering if there's a process or a system in place that they have that maybe we should talk to them and see if it works out, because if they not only have the cooperation with all the other departments, if they need it, and you're saying they can get it anyway through CAD, then why can't they get it anyway through RIMS? I don't understand what the holdup is. And then let me just further this, because I was thinking about this last night, that maybe a solution would be, well, first of all, if you found a documented instance of, I haven't heard you say it, but I've read you quoted saying that there was illegal access to some records. And so far I haven't heard anything that was done illegally other than an officer who illegally gained access prior to becoming sheriff, and he was fired over it. So I know that has happened in the past, but I haven't heard anything in the, you're into your third year yet, and so far I haven't seen anybody prosecuted for anything that's
well, prosecution and doing it illegally are much different. You can speak to the prosecutor who's standing behind me if you want to know about prosecution.
And you also have...
but I have absolutely stated that it's illegal.
I'm not done.
Okay, fine.
Finish so. So if you were to have an instance, which is a rare occasion where there was a questionable access, you could, to me, it would make sense to form a legitimate task force of representatives from each of the agencies that are actually involved in using the rims, and then having them have a system in place where they can actually go and look at that. And if it is illegal, there needs to be somebody to prosecute them. There's illegal access to information shared by private parties, then I want to see somebody arrested over it. You know, I would be happy to volunteer my records to open up publicly for all these folks to review and see if anybody's accessed my information illegally as a start.
So what you're telling me is you want to run the sheriff's office?
I don't believe I told you that.
Well,
Actually,
Frank, you
actually,
made a recommendation, but it's more than a recommendation. I was elected by the people of this county to run the sheriff's office. One of my duties as an elected official is to make sure that the people are protected. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to dispute that. Now, there's many ways to harm people. And certainly, releasing records on people that should not be released is a tremendous harm, and that's what I'm trying to prevent. Now, if you have a different way of doing that, then there's an electoral process that would allow you, if you want to run or whoever you want to support, to be the sheriff. But I am the sheriff, and I make these decisions.
Okay.
Hang on.
That's true. And I do not want to run the sheriff's department. I would like the sheriff to run it in an appropriate manner. And if we had a citizens review board, for example, maybe you could they could make recommendations on how to do this. I don't know.
So I don't think anybody's disputing you're running the sheriff's office.
Thank you.
I don't think anybody's disputing that you make the decisions. I'm going to ask you the question, are you open to suggestions if things aren't working?
I've listened to, I've had multiple conversations with Chief Rasmussen, and I'll listen to anything. But I'll listen to anything that makes sense that isn't going to compromise the goal that I have of maintaining, and this is a personal goal, but it's also a mandate in the penal code and a moral and ethical obligation to maintain these records in the best fashion possible so that they're not inappropriately used or released.
So there may be, I mean, and Supervisor Brown, we have to sort of sift through some of the emotion of this sometimes, but there's a suggestion buried in all of this that maybe there's a way to provide the protocols and some process so that if records are accessed inappropriately, there's a mechanism to deal with that. It sounds like there isn't today, that's just too many people accessing too many passwords out there, etc.
Well, and the other problem is that, again, when you issue passwords to outside agencies, which is not, and I don't know about Mendocino County, and frankly, this isn't Mendocino County. I have to run my office the way I feel appropriate. I don't know if what Mr. Brown is talking about is the interoperability, which Clear Lake, Lakeport, and Lake County Sheriffs all have access to right now, so that may be what he's talking about. I really don't know. But I'd be happy to entertain anything that's put in front of me, as I always am. But it has to be reasonable, and it has to meet both the legal criteria and the criteria that I set for the Sheriff's Office.
Well, and that's all I was doing is making a recommendation, and
Okay.
you don't seem to be that receptive to it. And it's just, well, that's true. I know, I understand that. It's all in who's making the delivery as to whether or not he'll accept it. So I'm open to anybody that he'll listen to make the recommendation that we do something where there's actually a cooperative effort instead. I mean, you know, for example, I do appreciate the audit aspect of this. But I would have to ask the question, who's auditing you?
Well, apparently you're trying to, but I mean...
No, I'm just asking.
Auditing me for what? What are you talking about? Auditing me on what? For ribs?
Yeah, who checks who's, you know?
The same people that audit the rest? Everybody. This is a general audit.
Everybody.
In our office, we have at least 2 people that have that capability, and one of them is sitting in this office, in this room right now, and the other one is at the office. You're saying who's auditing me? If you have a problem with it, talk to the Department of Justice. If you have some allegation against me, make it specific, please. Except not these like name calling and.
I would completely agree. Let's
Just
not
a
go.
random
Let's
audit.
not go down. Let's not go down that road. Let's stick with
Just a random audit.
Let's stick with public safety today. We have Supervisor Comstock, and then I just Frank. It sounds like you're open to hearing what people's issues are today. So we're gonna.
That's what I'm here for today, and I'm also here to make sure that the public understands and does not get any varnished or spun version of what's going on here. I've heard a lot of stuff out there in the media that is absolutely not true, or half-truths, or completely hollow allegations, this whole public safety deal. There's been nothing specific, not one instance where they say, oh, this officer, this happened, and this, not one. So I'm here waiting to hear that. I'll stand back up here and address it, and it's my responsibility. The responsibility ends at the end of my meeting.
Okay, Supervisor Comstock, you have a question?
A couple quick questions.
Yes, sir.
Sheriff, those records that you have right there beside you, audit trail, you know what that is?
Some of it is with a computer, the location of the computer. There's many different aspects.
Are those the names and what? Are those confidential records?
Yes, sir.
Is that appropriate for those to be here in a public setting like this, not locked up?
Unless you're going to tear them out of my hands, yes, they are.
Well, that might happen, but I find that
I certainly hope not.
I'm quite concerned with that. I spent quite a bit of time in the Navy, and I had a top secret special intelligence clearance. And so I know and understand very well that how information needs to be kept. And a couple of things: need to know supersedes right to know. Having had a top secret special intelligence clearance, I had the right to know a lot of stuff. I could only access that which I had the need to know. And then on national security basis, there's first there's confidential, serious, and gray. Those are the stages. But I'm quite concerned, and I understand. I don't understand why you would have brought those here. If they're confidential records, they shouldn't have been brought into a public forum like this. And I find that's probably not a good idea. I'm not trying to run the sheriff's office. I'm giving you my opinion as a citizen of the County of Lake and as a supervisor. I don't think that those should be brought.
Well, I work weekends, and I take these records home because I have to. There aren't enough hours in the day. Okay? I bring them here because if I need to refer to a number, I have them here for my use. They're confidential records. They're at my control. Nobody's going to take them away from me, sir. I guarantee you that. The second thing is I appreciate your Navy protocol, but that's not the protocol for the Department of Justice or these criminal information records. You have, before you can have the need to know, you must have the right to know.
I stated that.
No, you stated the exact opposite.
You have to have the right to know first.
That's correct,
Then,
okay.
but the need to know that supersedes the right.
The need to know supersedes the right to know. No, it does not,
No,
sir.
it's Sheriff.
I think the definition of supersedes, what he means is that you need right to know before you can get need to know.
That's exactly
But in
correct.
order to access a record, you have to have need to know.
That's absolutely right.
Exactly.
Or no,
So I think
you have to have both.
Okay.
You have to have the right to know first, because
You guys are vehemently agreeing, by the way.
Let's,
Just want to make it clear.
Sheriff, let's move on.
All right. go
You
ahead.
agree. You are in agreement on that. You have anything else to add at this point, or you want to?
No, ma'am, I'm done.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Rasmussen, or?
Actually, yes, City Manager Silveria wants to speak before I do.
First of all, I wanted to thank Madam Chair and members of the board for holding this meeting so quickly and for our letter to you for today. Also, as we all watch the media and see the tragedies that are happening with our first responders and our police department, and I feel that those that are keeping us safe need to have all the tools in the box they possibly can to keep us safe. And I have the utmost respect for Chief Rasmussen, police officer of the city of Lakesport. And I do know that if the sheriff had come to our chief and said he believes there was a problem and there was any complaints, which he's never had since he's been in office, that our department would have done an investigation and would take that very seriously and would have done whatever was necessary to get to the bottom of that. We've had those records, we've had the access to those records for decades here, and so a call would have been the respectful thing to do. And I know that my staff have responded to the sheriff because they've always respected the office of the sheriff. And again, I just want to thank you for having this meeting so quickly. And I'll let the sheriff, I'll let the chief explain the details of the safety and how it is unsafe for our officers. Thank you.
Before I get started, excuse me, I was losing my voice last night, so I'm hoping that I can get through this today. Before I get started on the prepared statement that I have regarding all these issues, I just want to say that, you know, it's difficult for me to sit here and listen to the sheriff make these allegations, particularly now when I hear him alluding to the fact that we may have committed a crime. There's been no investigation on any of this. There's no evidence that any inappropriate activity has occurred at this point yet. Anyway, first of all, I want to thank the Lake County Board of Supervisors and the County of Lake for acting on the City of Lakeport's request to immediately take up this serious public safety matter consideration in the interest of the health, safety, and welfare of our communities. As you are aware by now, on Tuesday, April 23rd of this year, Lakeport Police Management became aware that Lake County Sheriff Frank Rivera unilaterally ordered the shutdown of all of Lakeport Police Department's access to the Lake County Sheriff's Office RIMS system. This action was taken with absolutely no notice whatsoever to me or any members of my staff. We only learned of this after our staff was unable to access the system in the course of their official duty to access necessary information. Lieutenant Jason Ferguson contacted the Sheriff's Administrative Office to inquire about the problem and was advised that we had been in fact shut down by order of Sheriff Rivera, and if we had questions related to the issue, we were directed to contact him personally. I contacted the sheriff and first spoke to him via telephone at approximately 1400 hours in the presence of Lieutenant Ferguson. The sheriff confirmed that our RIMS access had been shut down and advised it was a matter of an audit and controlling access to the system. I asked the sheriff if any of my people had done anything wrong or inappropriate, and he stated no, absolutely not. I negotiated with the sheriff to reactivate access for me, Lieutenant Ferguson, and my 2 sergeants until the issue with the future access for my department could be worked out. The sheriff also said that he would have Lakeport Police call detail information placed into messages sent by dispatch from our RIMS, from his RIMS system to my RIMS system. Since that time, we have checked with officers and found the information is not coming as he stated it would. Even if the information was coming, as Sheriff Rivera stated, it would be completely ineffective and not cover what we need to conduct operations and provide for officer and community safety. I also had several other telephone conversations with Sheriff Rivera, the last of which I told him I believed he was endangering the safety of my officers and the members of my community. I also followed that telephone call with an email requesting that he immediately restore RIMS access for all of my staff and reminded him that he stated there were no allegations of my staff doing anything inappropriate and advised him that I believed his actions were inappropriate. In an email on April 24th, I advised the sheriff that I would not discuss this issue any further with him on the telephone and requested that our RIMS access be turned back on by the end of this day. We would only then meet with him in person, along with my appropriate staff, to discuss any future changes to our access. Later in the afternoon, I learned from a local media outlet that Sheriff Rivera was now accusing my staff of 600 violations of inappropriate use of the RIM system. Shortly thereafter, I received an email response from Sheriff Rivero advising that my office had hundreds of inappropriate examples of access to the system by members of my staff without justification or permission from him. He further alleged that my command staff and I were all accessing information we were not entitled to, and therefore would be shutting down the reinstated access at 0800 hours on April 25th. He has, in fact, shut down that access. With regard to Sheriff Rivero's 600 allegations of inappropriate use by my agency, I submit that these are simply the sheriff's allegations, and he does not know that these are, in fact, violations. He has provided me with copies of allegations, and my agency is now reviewing those. My command staff and I do take these allegations very seriously, as we do with any other public concern. An independent investigation of those allegations will be conducted and necessary action taken with regard to anything inappropriate found. Had the sheriff had such a problem with this on Tuesday, perhaps he should have made me aware of his concerns on Tuesday and not after I made my safety concerns public. The appropriate and professional way for Sheriff Rivero to have handled this situation, if he had evidence that my staff was acting inappropriately, would be to contact me, report the information, and allow me to investigate and correct the problem, as other law enforcement leaders across this country would operate. Instead, he just shut down my access. Instead, he just shut down my access with no notice, discussion, or statement of just cause. This is typical of Sheriff Rivero's response to things, as he has previously shown during his interaction with law enforcement leaders throughout this county. More specifically, with regard to Sheriff Rivero's allegations of my personal access to the RIMS records, I will cite some examples of this. On March 26th, I personally ran a check in the sheriff's RIMS to cross-check a registered felony Megan's Law sex offender currently living and registered in sheriff's jurisdiction, but reported to me committing supervised release violations by having contact with young female juveniles in downtown Lakeport. This offender has been registered in Lakeport, and the information was needed to see if there was a violation of the law. On March 29th, I personally ran checks on wanted subjects, one of which was also wanted by LCSO, in preparation for putting out information to the public. On April 18th, I personally ran a check on felony suspect to cross-reference information to make a positive identification, because my office was in the process of preparing a search warrant affidavit to search for a firearm because the subject was legally prohibited from possessing firearms. And based on the things he was doing at that time, he was a clear danger to the public. I asked how Sheriff Rivero believes these are inappropriate access to the RIM system. I submit that accessing information to these cases is very much related to officer and community safety. It is important for the board and the community to understand the Lakeport Police Dispatch contract and our prior access to Sheriff's Office RIMS for at least the last 10+ years. And in prior years, access to the previous Sheriff's Office Alpha CAD records. Lakeport Police does have its own RIMS system, but it has not been possible to connect that to the LCSO in a way that all of our dispatch information, call logs, officer-generated records, and many other pieces of information generated from what our police department does. All of the aforementioned records, 10+ years of them, are entered into and stored in the LCSO RIMS system due to the nature of our dispatch agreement. The sheriff has locked me out of accessing this information, which is vital to officer and community safety. By the way, I have absolutely no issue with the sheriff having or using any of the information generated by LPD that's in his system. Information needs to be shared. I believe access to this information goes hand in hand with our contract, as it has been part of our agreement for dispatch services. I believe Sheriff Rivera's actions have breached that contract and agreement. This service agreement is now not working as I need it to work in order to provide for public safety in the city of Lakewood. In addition to information needed from the system as described above, where I access information for public and officer safety, the Lakeport Police Department relies on these records for everyday operation of the police department to provide for public safety. Some of these records include daily activity logs and media reports, Public Records Act requests, statistics, booking records, sex register and compliance history, calls for service which include officer response time, nature of call and action taken by officer, and CAD information that needs to be submitted to the district attorney. Examples of where this information is critical to officer and public safety are, number one, where we have a suspect description and we need to go back and check records, where an officer may have remembered having contact with somebody matching that description maybe 2-3 weeks ago, but can't remember a name, but knows the description is there. Need to go back into his activity logs to try to identify the stop and time that that was made, get the name that he ran. Now we have a possible suspect identified. We can then immediately get a picture and get the information out to the media. Number two, where an officer is conducting background investigation on a subject that we are doing a probation search warrant or arrest warrant on. Additionally, other safety information that we may need to get to the public can now not be accessed or released. Additionally, the Lakeport Police Department is in the process of submitting a United States Department of Justice grant for community and school resource officer funding. In order to provide accurate information in applying for the grant, the LPD needs to access their patrol and call stats. We cannot now access that information and may be in danger of not being able to succeed in receiving this grant or others in the near future. I submit that the possible loss of hundreds of thousands of dollars in COPS grants, just because we're unable to access necessary information, is very much an officer and community safety issue. The Lakeport and Clear Lake Police Departments recently received special state COPS funding to work in collaboration with the Lake County Probation Department to conduct felony enforcement operations on probationers, parolees, and post-release community supervision subjects. I am aware that the sheriff has also shut down the Lake County Probation Department's access to enter felony probationers and PRCS subjects into RIMS or update their records. Probation was doing that as a courtesy to make that information available to police officers and deputies on the street. Without this information being entered, officers on the street will not immediately be aware of probation or PRCS status. I submit that this is very much an officer and community safety issue. Law enforcement across the United States has for many years and continues today to move towards collaboration and information sharing. Failing to share information puts the community and officers in danger, and innocent citizens get hurt and killed when law enforcement does not work together. This is the best law enforcement practice, and the rest of us continue to move in that direction of information sharing, while Sheriff Rivera continues to go in an entirely different direction. This is yet another example of Sheriff Rivera's inability to work collaboratively with allied law enforcement agencies for the betterment of the community. And I will not stand by and allow Sheriff Rivera to endanger my staff or my community. Again, I stress that our access to these dispatch records contained in Sheriff's RIMS is very necessary to our continued efficient operations and the safety of our officers in the community. I hereby request that the Lake County Board of Supervisors take whatever action necessary to immediately correct this situation as soon as possible, as we consider this a matter of public safety for all of Lake County. Thank you.
Feel free to sit down. We may have a couple of questions. I know I do. Chief Rasmussen, one of the questions I have is, first of all, you're asking the Board of Supervisors to take action when in fact this is the Sheriff's action to take. There may be some actions we can take, and I'll ask County Council later to sort of outline what the board can and can't do. I know that, for example, we in the past have audited former sheriff's financial records and contracts. You know, we have the ability to do financial audits, for example. My question for you is, if the sheriff and the City of Lakeport Police Department do not come to an agreement, what alternatives do you see? You know, again, we're here in part of this, the reason for this meeting is to discuss public safety, and the public, rightly so, may be alarmed at this moment, so.
Right, and I understand that. I understand that we're not talking about contract right now, but my contract is with the Board of Supervisors, not the Lake County Sheriff, for dispatch services.
For dispatch,
I'm more than willing, as I stated in here and as I told the sheriff in an email, turn my access back on to the previous levels. I will then meet with you with appropriate staff, and we can sit at the table and try to work this out. But that's the only way it's going to happen. I'm not going to communicate with him in emails or on the phone and try to go back and forth. That's ineffective and it's not going to work.
So you're suggesting a face-to-face meeting?
Yes, absolutely. With my appropriate staff, his appropriate staff.
If an agreement is not reached, do you have alternatives?
Right now, I'm looking at other options to see what I may need to do.
And it will involve, I imagine, cost and...
Potentially. But right now, I mean, I'm coming up on owing the county for half of my dispatch contract. But I don't feel my service is being provided right now today.
I have no questions. I think the questions that I had prior to this about the buzzwords, as the sheriff indicated, of public safety and officer safety have clearly been identified as more than just buzzwords.
I don't have any questions, but at this point, I have a very brief statement to make. Those of us who have been around here for a long time remember 32 years ago, Officer of the Lake County Sheriff's Department was killed, Rich Elbush. And one of the reasons he was killed was because information was not shared enough for him to know what he was coming upon. He lost his life because of that. District Attorney Don Anderson was the deputy sheriff at that time, was very involved in the apprehension of those individuals. That was a very, very grave day in Lake County's history, and I would hope that we would learn that the information sharing is absolutely vital to protect citizens and law enforcement officers, and that communication needs to be open totally. This letter received from the City of Lakeport is signed by the mayor of the City of Lakeport. It was not just the mayor, he's the former chief of police of the City of Lakeport. He spent more years than I would care to count in law enforcement. He didn't do this lightly, and that's why we'd have to be here considering this. This information needs to be openly shared with all law enforcement officials so that you can do your job to protect yourselves, protect the citizens of this county.
You know, I want to add to that too. You know, I appreciate the men and women that are up here, standing up here. I've worked with almost all of you at some point, and I really appreciate the work that they've done. But I got to tell you that this doesn't just go one way to where it's for their benefit. To share this information is a benefit to our deputies as well. And the discussions that I've had over the last couple of days with our deputies, I can assure you that if it weren't for the concern of retribution, you would have, again, in the sheriff's words, many, 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 many deputies up there standing with you.
Thank you.
So the City of Lakeport is not the only department that's here. I'll open it for other departments to come and speak, and then we can open it to the public.
Good morning. I'm Ron Howe, Chief Probation Officer for Lake County. I think Chief Rasmussen covered a lot of things really well. My part in this is going to be pretty brief. I will approach a little bit of the officer and community of public safety issue that the sheriff says does not exist. For probation, what we use RIMS for is twofold. We input information into RIMS, current probation information, addresses, search clauses, whether or not someone's actually on probation, hazard information that we may have access to, and that then is available to any field officer who happens to run somebody through RIMS. Ironically, I've told the sheriff this, I think that what he shut us out of is more a benefit to his people than our own. We have that information in probation. We get it from the court. We put it in RIMS so it's accessible to anybody else who needs it out there in the field. I think that's very much an officer safety issue. Again, if there's a hazard we're aware of, we want you to know about it. It's also a liability issue. If someone's no longer on probation or on searchable probation, it's probably something a deputy in the field wants to know. The other useful RIMS we have is the in-custody system. Probation is responsible for writing reports and recommendations to the courts. In-custody status, time served, all those kind of issues come from in-custody. The system in custody. We have had in the past 15 users that have the access to RIMS. The sheriff's recommendation, or what he's willing to give me now, is one person to do everybody's RIMS access. For me, it's a big efficiency issue. If I have one person having to do the input and inquiries for 15 other people, that's probably one full position. That's all they're going to do. That in itself, efficiency is always a law enforcement safety issue and a public safety issue. For an example, if I have one probation officer, Sheriff Herrera has also told me that he believes it should be a peace officer with access. If I have a probation officer doing nothing but this, that's a probation officer that's not in the field. That's a probation officer that's not supervising the caseload. And I believe that certainly would be a public safety issue. We have not been denied information from the sheriff. We've just been given a process that's inconvenient and inefficient. And for what I consider to be no reason. I've asked Sheriff Herrera the one question many times, why? Why now? Why us? He's never been able to tell me anything that my people or anybody in my department has done inappropriate. His answer is simply, I have the responsibility to be accountable. I have the responsibility to audit. And I agree with that. But I have 15 users. If I have to write 15 reports one day, or my people do, that's 15 RIMS inquiries, whether one person's making it or 15 people are making one. If I have to audit that, that's the same. In fact, I think you lose accountability having one person doing it all for multiple people, because then you have a little gray area in between who requested it and who actually needs it. Whereas the system as it exists, if I have 15 people with users, if Sheriff Ribeiro or I ever found anything inappropriate, it's simple. The audit trail tells me who did it. That to date has not happened. He's made a lot of claims about having to do continuous audits from the time he took office until now. And if that's actually the case, so be it, but I haven't heard anything about any of my people doing anything inappropriate. If that is the case, I find it a little suspicious that in one afternoon you could find 600 violations for late. Brad's business more than mine, but had he been continuously doing these things, wouldn't something turn up? If something was inappropriate, and then we have a press release that goes out that looks disfavorably upon him, and all of a sudden we have 600. It's just, I don't think that's accurate. I'm fully expecting that I'll probably receive the same kind of email coming soon about my own people, and I'm more than willing. I've told them not to look into anything he tells me. It is an officer safety issue, and more than that, we can argue all day about why he would do it. I would speculate. I'm not going to up here. But the bottom line is, even if he wanted to do this, there's a proper way to do it. Like Lakeport PD, I came to work one day just to find that it was shut off. I had spoken to the sheriff. He had told me he had a concern. He had worked it out. He could have come to me at any time and said, I have a problem with this many users. What can we do? And we would have done it. I'd be happy to audit my own people. That's just not how it went. We came to work one day and it was gone. With a message, if you got a problem with it, contact the sheriff first. It's just not the way to do business, to cooperate with law enforcement in our county. It's not efficient. I'll take any questions if you have any.
2 years ago, we had a wonderful tool in law enforcement, extremely wonderful. That was cooperation between agencies. Unfortunately, we don't have that now. And I can say that I can really sympathize with Robbie Howe and Brad Rasmussen, what they're going through now, because back in April 2011, the same thing happened to our office. Our access to RIMS was arbitrarily shut off unilaterally with no warning, no comment, no discussion between Sheriff Rivero and my office. But I was told later we had almost 5,000 different entries which Sheriff Rivero was inappropriate or illegal. And what that was is our investigators were, kind of like Robbie's officers do, were updating information on suspects, witnesses, and the public. We're getting addresses that they don't have that we would input. It was a benefit to the sheriff's office, even more so than us. Our investigators would access the RIM system and be able to read reports from the sheriff's office. Quite often, there will be investigations going on. The sheriff's office is doing, at the same time we're doing the investigation on the same person. There was that cooperation, we were able to do this. Now, well, back in April, there were problems between the sheriff and I. There were 3 major problems going on back in April. One was the issue of subpoenas, where he refused to serve subpoenas like we've been doing since the time, since almost forever. I wouldn't prosecute one individual that he wanted prosecuted. And if there's the other issue, which somewhat dealt with the RIM system, I would not allow electronic filing from his office to our office with just a 2-week notice. It was a demand he made. He says, in 2 weeks when we're not submitting reports, we're going to do it electronically. I says, no, we're going to have to go over this a little bit more and work the system of doing this little work. So he was angry with me. In that month, he shot us off the RIMS totally. So then in October, we finally came to an agreement with subpoenas. And I agreed to this mainly on one condition, is that he, in this MOU, he said he would turn us back onto the RIM system to give us reader access. That way our investigators can look at some of the reports, we can look up the information that we needed. That would have been great. I signed that MOU back in October of 2011, and as of this day, he's still reneged on that agreement. He will not turn us back on the RIMS. What this has done, not only has it affected our ability to do our job, because we can't look at the reports, we don't know what they're doing, unless we have one-on-one conversations with their investigators or their deputies, or unless we get a police report or go through a long process of asking for information. And also what it's done is our investigators, when we're out in the street, we cannot now call into the RIM system and find out information, do research of the people we're going to investigate. A lot of times we're going to investigate suspects in crimes that we have very little information. We can run teletype information to the state, but we can't see what's in their computer system, the sheriff's office computer system. So we don't know what these people are going to do content and do law enforcement action on it. We don't know what they're like. So yes, he is putting my investigators in jeopardy. God help them if anybody ever hurt one of my investigators because they don't have access to the information that they should have. I really like your comment on Richard Helbush, because that's the problem we got now. Had Richard Helbush had that information, he probably would be alive standing here today. And in regards to Mr. Rivero's comment about prosecuting cases like you brought up around, he's never submitted anything to us. Not one single report has come over to our office for prosecution for illegal use of the RIM system or any other type of system. And just last, I want to draw the board's attention to something that occurred just less than a month ago down at Clay Police Department. One of Sheriff Rivero's investigators was looking for someone. He can't find him. He goes to the Clay Police Department and enters their RIM system. He finds them, and he arrested that individual and got that child molester off the street, only because the Clear Lake Police Department was cooperating with his agency and allowed them into the RIM system. Now that's can be done by civilians. Any questions?
No, I just have a comment and recollection of that, because I remember back when Frank initially, he and Kelly Cox and I were meeting in Kelly's office, and he made this allegation that investigators in your office were using the system, and he did say illegally. And I said, well, you need to talk to DA about that. You share that with him. And he said he hadn't had a chance to get a hold of you yet. And I said, well, I'll get a chance. And I got up right then. I walked to your office, and I said, grab your coat, let's go down and talk to Kelly. By the time we got down here, Frank was gone, and we shared with you the information, and you said, well, I'm going to take care of it right now. And you went and looked at it and found out that it wasn't illegal access, it was just what you described. So the nonsense story that goes on the radio and everything else about, how, he's, done all these things to fight another buzzword, corruption, into his third year, still no one's been arrested, is just nonsense.
That's very true, I do recall that. Yeah. Not only has he never sent over any single report about misuse of RIM system, he has never sent over any single report about corruption in any county government. I haven't seen anything, and I talked to the Department of Justice, they haven't seen it.
No.
It isn't, it's the way it is.
Departments here.
Distinguished members, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. It's with heavy heart. It's a sad day in law enforcement over here.
We can't hear him.
Microphone.
Closer to the mic.
You can go. Sorry about that. Is that better?
Yeah.
We have reader access currently to the Lake County Sheriff's Department, and I appreciate it that we still have it. A little piece of trivia that hasn't came out yet is many of my predecessors that I grew up in the business and in life with are here. Back when RIMS was originally purchased for the Sheriff's Department, it was with the intention that all agencies in the county have RIMS, with one of the big selling points of that is that we all share that information and we can all use each other's systems and get that information from it. And it was quite a cost to do that. I believe it was 05 or 06 that the Clear Lake Police Department switched over to RIMS, well over $250,000. And that was the purpose, and we were working towards that. There was a member of the Sheriff's Department under a different regime that was writing a program. So information can be limited for ongoing investigations, that you'd only be able to review a case that was fully completed or what have you to that aspect. That staff member's no longer here, but that was the agreement. It was the gentleman's agreement at many chiefs meetings that we were at to make this happen, with the ultimate goal of going paperless in the county. And that's a huge benefit for my department, so I don't have to drive 50 miles to get a report up to the DA's office, or if they need another photograph or something to that effect. Currently with what's happened, Brad and I were lucky enough to get some funding to do some special enforcement on the PCRS. It absolutely hinders us. For my department, it is not as great because we have our own dispatch center and I have all that information that's immediately put into the reports automatically, but not on Brad because he's in a unique position. It's probably more troublesome with probation. That's how we get probation information. Unfortunately, probation is basically banker's hours. It's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Persons that we contact that we need that information on are a lot of times after hours, weekends, and holidays, and we have no way of accessing current information. We have that reader-only access to RIMS, to the Sheriff's Department, which is fantastic, but it's only as good as the information going into it. So if Rob's staff cannot put in the current information, we can't rely upon that. The not knowing somebody's on a supervised release can be catastrophic. It can also be catastrophic if we believe they still are, and they're not, because now we can no longer rely upon that. That means
But I'd like to remind everyone that we are talking about the information on access to law enforcement information systems and discussion and consideration of options by our board. I would urge people, if you have facts, to stick to them and try to avoid drama. And I would encourage anyone with ideas as to how to resolve issues like this of impasse between departments to be sure to bring your ideas forward to this board. So there was a request to go first right here because she has to leave. Come on up.
Thank you very much for holding this meeting today.
Turn your mics on.
My name is Barbara Galvin, and I'm the mother of a firefighter. He's with CAL FIRE, and he volunteers in South Lake. Another very important reason for open communication among all law enforcement is that our first responders have all the information that they need before they go into a home that has a medical emergency or anyplace else. They're ordered a stage, and when they're in the staging pattern, they're waiting for law enforcement to provide information or backup. So I just really would like to know that all the most recent current information is shared among all agencies for their protection and the protection of the entire county. And also just as a suggestion, because I know we have a grown-up problem and a grown-up solution. And I think that when various departments get together, and hopefully the sheriff's going to be willing to discuss it, find a solution that works for everyone, I would encourage you to invite members of the public to sit in and listen so that it is a joint effort. And having the access is extremely important. Privacy of the citizens is also important. Thank you.
Okay, so those who want to speak, just form a line. I think there's already a line there, but there are plenty of chairs if you gentlemen would like to sit down.
Good morning. Officer Jerry Baser with the Lakeport Police Department on behalf of the Lakeport Police Officers Association. I'd like to thank the Lake County Board of Supervisors for your prompt consideration regarding this matter. I'd also like to make a quick clarification. I think that Sheriff Rivero missed a point in regards to Chief Clausen's statement. The fact that an officer from, or a deputy from the Lake County Sheriff's Department went to Clear Lake Police Department, I don't think it's an issue of login. It's an issue of sharing that information. That's what's most important, to keep the citizens and officers and deputies safe on the street. Members of the Lakeport Police Officers Association wish to express their full support for Chief Rasmussen and his administration in their efforts to regain access to this vital record system. The Lakeport Police Department and its individual officers have a mutually beneficial relationship with the Lake County Sheriff's Office and the Lake County Central Dispatch in sharing vital officer safety information. We believe that Sheriff Rivero's unwarranted removal of our access to this important resource is detrimental to that relationship. In addition to the uses mentioned by Chief Rasmussen, Lakeport Police Department officers rely on the Sheriff's RIM system to locate records on subjects who may not be in the Lakeport Police Department system, to update our own records, to generate photo lineups, to prepare and brief other officers for warrant service, and for many other legitimate law enforcement uses. We're also concerned about the Lake County Probation Department's loss of access to the Sheriff's RIM system. I understand they have some limited access. The probation staff are not able to enter that probation terms or post-release community supervision update information on offenders living in and or frequenting the city of Lakeport, thereby jeopardizing public safety and officer safety. Sheriff Rivero's removal of our access to the system will result in our officers being less informed about subjects we come in contact with. We consider this a major public safety and officer safety issue, and add our voices to Chief Rasmussen's and the City of Lakeport's administration's request for complete reinstatement of our access.
I assume this line is the group that everybody in line wants to speak, is that right? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good morning. My name is Terry Larson, and I'm editor of Lake County Magazine. We're an online magazine here in Lake County. In a way, I'm here to take responsibility for this action. It was my team and myself that released some information about RIMS for some things that happened back in 2011. that may have triggered other audits that now led to this point. I do want to say I'm not defending the sheriff in any way for the way that he's done this, and what I'm trying to do is just bring some facts into the situation. There's a lot of misinformation regarding RIMS, what RIMS is. I've been studying it for the last month while investigating this story. I've been to federal authorities, I've been to authorities in Mendocino County and state authorities, and I have verified all the information that, that I'll be presenting here. And I'll try to make it quick. The full document is available on our website, lakehillmagazine.com, and I will try to just kind of briefly edit this so that I don't take up all this time, but it's very important to know the background of why we're sitting in this situation. This is not the beginning of something. This actually should be the end of something, something that took place and started back in 2011. And according to all the sources that I've talked to, from the FBI to Mendocino County Sheriff's Department to CHP at the state level, because the CHP here locally would not speak to me about the issue, although I see that they have shown up here in the room. Everyone says that unfettered access to any RIMS database is absolutely not appropriate by other agencies. The access that they're given is to a certain security level. Those levels are based on the agency and what the agency needs to know. The fact that records were changed by other agencies, such as the DA's office and possibly the Lakeport Police Department, that is felony charges. Okay, no one is allowed to change anybody else's database, and I'm sure that those other agencies would object if someone went into their databases and changed those records. I'm speaking as a citizen now, and the fact that for the last, well, my records go back all the way to 2009, but I know it goes even longer than that. Agencies, law enforcement agencies in this county have had basically unfettered access to our citizens' records. I've had citizens, multiple citizens come up to me and specifically give detailed information on how they know these rooms were accessed by certain things that came out in public, and other public officials have been named in these accusations. And that information is also going to be forwarded to the proper authorities to be dealt with. There will be an investigation. My recommendation is that we have an independent audit by someone outside the county, maybe even a federal agency, DOJ, and that these wrongdoings are investigated, and that the protocols are also improved within the different law enforcement departments, because there's no question that law enforcement needs to communicate with each other. We have to have that happening, and I can just see that this is going to open a lot of doors of communication amongst these different agencies and could very well end up to be in the best interests of the county. So shortly after the sheriff received a vote of no confidence, I was sent a document that I had looked at on the sheriff's website at least once or twice, and finding the information contained within to possibly be damaging to the local district attorney, the sheriff, and other law enforcement agencies, I then realized that there had been no follow-up on this report. Now, this report was produced by California Judicial Investigations, a private investigative team out of the Bay Area. I attempted to find out from them who hired them, and they referred me back to the sheriff and Anita Grant. The sheriff told me that as there was a lot of controversy surrounding 4 incidents that had taken place during his watch in the first quarter of 2011, he went to Anita and told her something along the lines of, let's get this out in the open once and for all and settle it. I'll hire a third-party investigator in my department. We'll pay for it. Over $15,000 was paid for this report that very few people got to see. When I called and spoke with Anita about it, she was very evasive, and she told me that Frank was responsible for the hiring of the investigators. Frank said that he did not hire the team, but asked her to do it and settle the questions regarding his conduct on these incidents. He did cooperate with the investigators fully, although the DA's office and Clear Lake PD also did not cooperate with them. Not getting any satisfaction with either side, I went directly to the investigators and asked them if they could tell me who hired them. Joseph Soldis told me, sure thing, we'll just call Anita and Frank and we'll get back to me as soon as possible.
This is about RIMS, right?
Yes,
okay.
It is directly about RIMS. Anita was the only person they reported back to on this report, and the only person who saw an unredacted version of it. Frank was never called by the investigators. I got a call back from them that night saying that they're not allowed to tell me who hired them because it would be a violation of client privacy. So Frank never got a call from them that day, so I have to assume it came from Ms. Grant. So $15,000 of our hard-earned money paid for the report, and nothing was taken on any action at the time. The second section of this 4-section report is called Access to RIMS by Unauthorized Personnel. And of course it piqued my interest. My first call was to the sheriff to explain how this report had never been addressed. He basically said that the DA had told the investigators at the time, which was also in the report, that he was conducting his own internal investigation and that he would handle it. But there has been no results produced from that investigation. And those same 4 DA investigators that also were working for the sheriff's department are still working for the DA's office. Now, how they accessed the RIMs was they had a higher level of security by working as sheriff's department dispatchers. So they were using that access level to access information and taking it back to the DA's office. That in itself is misdemeanor crime as long as no records are changed. But you actually heard our DA say that records were changed, and we don't know who did it and why they did it, but just the fact that records were changed, that is a felony offense according to federal law, okay, and the Corey rules, which is criminal offender record information. So the penal code states that it's need to know, right to know, as the sheriff did say, and in compliance with the Corey regulations, Lake County Sheriff's Department maintained and managed Corey records, and that did include CAD, incident reports, crime reports, all the basic documentation, any interaction with law enforcement any citizen would have are contained in RIMS. So it's specific to Lake County Sheriff's Office. That's what everyone needs to know. This is not the CAD database. This is not any other database except specifically to Lake County Sheriff's Office. So they have the right to determine who gets that information and at what levels of access that they be granted. So there are penal codes, and the sheriff was correct. It was California Penal Code 1175 through 1181. And in my investigation, I have found that there has been a long history of abuse. This goes back to the Mitchell-Hopkins era. And Mr. Brown brought up a gentleman that was prosecuted for doing that in 2009. But again, I've also met other people who have not come forward because of fear, because they're dealing with law enforcement here and they're afraid to come forward. They come to me privately and they're willing to testify that they feel that their records have been accessed. Okay, so I also in my research found copies of a contract between the Robinson Rancheria Tribal Council. It's a cooperative agreement between the Robinson Rancheria Police Department, a quote-unquote federally deputized police agency of the United States Department of Interior, and the Lake County District Attorney in Lake County. This interagency agreement was entered into on the 12th day of August in 2010 and established a prosecutorial relationship with District Attorney Don Anderson and the tribal police. At that time, the top cop on the reservation was a federally commissioned BIA officer. Today, that officer is John Irwin. He's a former Lake County cop who no longer holds a federal commission. What that means is that the contract between the tribal police should be null and void, yet the DA is still supporting illegal evictions by an illegal government with officers who are impersonating federal officers.
Kind of heading away from RIMS now.
It's going right back right now.
Okay,
I got to set up the background.
Circle
So
back.
why is this important to the issue? Because on May 5th, 2011, the DA's office received $279,000 from the Indian Gaming Special Distribution Fund, money that in previous years had been less than half this amount. An article in the Record Beast by Jeremy Walsh said that local agencies, including the county's district attorney's office and the sheriff's office, local fire districts, and other organizations were allowed to apply for this money. Members of the Indian Gaming Local Community Benefit Committee gathered to vote on which applications were approved and determine the funding distribution. Supervisors Rob Brown and Jeff Smith and Robinson delegate Buffy Jimenez were the only voting members present at the meeting. As a result, all 3 committee members had to vote in favor of an application for it to be approved. Well, Brown and Smith voted to approve the funds that Big Valley wanted to get to the sheriff's office, but Jimenez voted against it, so no funds were distributed to the sheriff's office that year. And Rivero said at that time, earlier in that year, he had received a letter from Robinson Tribal Police offering that the tribe would support distributing mitigation funds to the sheriff's office in exchange for cross-deputizing the tribal officers. In addition to cross-training, the DA's office and Robinson were also demanding that the tribal cops be allowed access to RIMS. This was not something I could support because it would put all of the liability for their actions of the county of Lake on the sheriff's office, said Rivero. Okay. So I did some research myself, and I spoke to Randy Johnson up at Mendocino County. He's in charge of the RIMS up there. He's a captain. He told me that there is absolutely no precedent for any tribal law enforcement agency to be allowed any access to RIMS, period. That is totally not allowed. Okay, so they also said that the reason that they didn't give the sheriff any money that year was because he had denied them the access to RIMS as well as cross-training. So that to me is a big red flag. Okay, here you have DA's office receiving a huge amount of money, and he's going forward with prosecuting of illegal evictions and things on Robinson, which is not related to RIMS, but he was also advocating for these tribal police to have access. In my investigation, I found out that John Irwin, according to the Bureau of Investigations, is not a federally commissioned officer. There are no federal commissioned officers on Robinson. Therefore, they have no authority to access any information regarding any citizens of Lake County, period. So the fact that they're asking for that access is totally out of line, okay? So you have a DA who's received a large sum of money from the tribe, and they want access to RIMS, and the sheriff finds out that he's got dispatchers that are sharing information with the DA's office. So he cuts off their access in 2011. So now we fast forward to now. Well, right after that was the investigation that began into the sheriff's Brady letter. This Brady letter was created by Mr. Anderson. He also print any record without their knowledge and permission, period. Okay, these are the rules. These are the state and federal guidelines. So that's why I'm saying there's a lot of misinformation here regarding what RIMS is and who's really allowed to access it. The sheriff has an agreement with the state as one of 58 county sheriffs that he will protect that information of our citizens. And he is doing just that. If he found something that is not appropriate, I'm not agreeing with his methods of handling things, but I think that he is right on in denying contact until there's a system in place that will not allow inappropriate action. And sir, inappropriate action means accessing any RIMS database without the sheriff's permission. That is inappropriate action. Okay, so yesterday we tried to call Anita again to talk to her about the contract with the LPD. Because in the contract, as the sheriff stated, it says nothing about RIMS in that contract. So when he asked the question, she said, that's a very complicated question, but I understand what you're saying. She asked him to hold on, and she walked away from the phone and never came back. Okay? So I see too many red flags here to think that this is just an issue of public safety. There is no public safety situation because anyone that needs these records can get them. Whether they can get them fast enough, that's maybe up for discussion. But he is not denying full access to anything. He is denying access to inappropriate access to parts of the RIMS that really are not to be accessed by any other law enforcement agency without his permission. And I've got all the documentation to back that up, and I'll be happy to talk to anyone privately about it.
Here, here. Very well said. Very well researched.
County Council, it's kind of uncharacteristic behavior for you to walk away from a telephone call.
Actually, I wasn't on the phone. Kathy O'Connell in my office was on the phone.
No, Anita, we know your voice.
Fair enough.
It's not to dispute it here.
All right, thanks.
Hey guys, I'm glad you brought up the Constitution when you first opened the meeting.
Just say your name, please.
Bruce Forsyth. Everybody tells me they know me, but I guess they don't. Rob, you know what the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution is? You know what the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution is? You don't know? Denise?
The right to administer search and seizure.
Close.
It's illegal.
Privacy. You raised your hand, you know the Constitution, but you don't, do you? Now listen, this is about,
Honest to God, Bruce, do you want a constitutional quiz?
This is about public privacy. And it is a safety issue when RIMS is accessed illegally. If my file, if these people's files, if the public's files are illegally accessed, it is a safety issue. It's significant. You don't want yours accessed. Nobody here wants somebody not authorized to access those RIMS files. And that's what happened. We know that's happened. We know it happened at least 5,000 times. minimum by the judicial report. Anita got the report. She knows, he knows, you know. I am urging you to take the bull by the horns on this. You need to open up an audit. You need to bring in an outside agency. You should have done it a year ago. Nixon would have made it through his presidency if he admitted to the Watergate in the beginning. You're doing the citizens, Anita, a disjustice. You know that these accesses illegally happen. You know the dispatchers or the investigators of the DA use dispatcher credentials to access. You know, everyone knows this.
Bruce, not everyone knows this. This is
Okay,
this is the first hearing we've ever.
Everyone who should know this knows it. Read the report, Denise. You'll see.
This is the first hearing we've had on this item. So
but you've had a 59-page report in front of you for over a year.
I haven't.
Well, Anita, give it to him.
It's been on the sheriff's website for 2 years.
Okay, so I have to go to the.
Okay, go to this. Read.
I can go to the
I'm
sheriff's
surprised
website.
you haven't, because that report is 99% what it's all about. Please read it. You don't have to read the 59 pages. It deals with other issues, but there's a section on it.
Fair enough, but just make the assumption that
We're trying to do the right thing here, okay?
And I'm hoping so, but Anita knows all about this and has. She got the report mailed to her. Okay? She knows. Open up an independent investigation and audit every single access from now back to how far you have to. The judicial group stopped counting at 5,000. And they said it could be as many as 10,000 illegal citizen accesses. You've got to take action on it. You can't push it under the rug, Anita. You've got to take significant action that tells the citizens their privacy is protected. Yes, I saw the report, and you know what? We're taking action on it. It's critical. My file was accessed illegally. And Rob Brown was a party to it. I can prove it, he'll say no, but his record of lying doesn't lend credibility. I'm not going to go into how I know. And you carried around a picture of me.
It's on your
that
website. It's on the sheriff's website.
And Rob, don't interrupt me. When you found, hey, Rob,
Okay, hang on. You know what? Let's go ahead and let's go.
I didn't want to go down this road.
Guys,
It's going to take too long.
guys,
I want to finish talking.
Supervisor
I'm
Brown.
not going to interrupt you. Denise, can I have my floor?
Hold on a second. Supervisor Brown?
Go up to the fourth floor. Anybody here can go up there and
Rob,
access your extensive.
I have a witness that knows what you did. We'll get into that later.
Let's see some
Let's-
Rob, we'll get into it later.
Okay, hang on, everyone. Bruce, I'm going to give you the floor in a second.
Thank you.
Let me just say something. I don't want this to happen again. Let him finish speaking, then go after it.
They're all speaking.
My file was accessed already. I know it for a fact. And when that audit gets done, it will be shown. But do the audit. You don't have to bring in the judicial group because everybody feels that they were hired by Frank or not, or anything. Get a separate one. But you must audit the files. You cannot let this just lie here. It was illegal, period. There's absolutely no question. It was illegal, period. Take it by the horn and get an independent agency in. If you don't do it yourself, someone else is coming in. It'll happen. It has to. Okay, that's a significant point. Almost done. Thank you, Sheriff Rivero. You are the first elected official who I have seen stand up for the rights and the privacy of citizens. God bless you for doing so. I fear what would happen if there had been someone, for example, from the old Mitchell regime who was sheriff now. This would not see the light of day. I thank you. You're a stand-up guy, and it's important, very important. Concerns for public safety shall never supersede the Constitution. Period. Get an audit done. Tell the citizens of this county that you've done it and the records are to be shown. That's the biggest request. And if you don't, this thing snowballs bigger, and you all know it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to say the Fourth Amendment is the right to unreasonable search and seizure. And by the way, the Constitution doesn't mention privacy specifically, but it implies it in the Fourth Amendment.
Thank you.
I'm going to respond, because I can tell you right now that if your records were illegally accessed, I want to see some arrest. And if it's a felony, as Terry stated,
Then get an audit done, Ron. Simple.
you have a guy back there doing the audit, and I'm glad you appreciate how much he does for you, because it's nice to have a partner in your blog that you can trust.
Ron, you don't trust the sheriff. Take him out of the audit picture. Bring in an outside independent agency.
So we know your suggestion. And actually, I would like to encourage...
You're not getting the last word on this one, Ron.
I'm not done with this yet.
Rob probably will get the last word. That's how it works. But I would like to encourage people to make suggestions. So thank you for the suggestion. Do we have?
I'm not finished yet. I can assure you that if there was a felony committed, Bruce, adios. If there's a felony committed, that the man back there who claims he's been working laboriously over this and making sure the public is protected, there would have been an arrest by now. I got a phone call about him being a part of an anonymous, threatening, life-threatening blog that was very detrimental to law enforcement. I found out who it was through very little effort. I went upstairs to the courthouse to find out what the true motive was behind his detest for the last sheriff, and I found it. It was very easy to access. Anybody's court records, including his arrest record, is accessible up there in the court. Those files are public information. It's not gathered illegally. He's still upset, apparently, over that. So that's how that happened.
Fair enough. So it's now 12:10, and this has gone. Yeah, I did. How many people are left who want to speak? 3, 4. Okay. So let's, don't rehash old stuff, please.
I kind of feel like I'm trying to get an accurate weather report here. My name is Bob Chalk. I'm a resident of Kelseyville, and I've got over 20 years experience as far as the administration of the law enforcement databases. So as I talk, I do have a little bit of experience in that. First of all, I want to say that I have respect for a sheriff or police chief who has the responsibility to administer such databases, because it is a large responsibility. What I want to do is stay away from a lot of the stuff that's already been said and try to just focus on what the procedural process may better have been in this circumstance. And I just made a couple of notes as the sheriff was talking. He said that auditing has been going on for a long time. Situations were still occurring. I can understand that auditing has been going on for a long time. How does that necessitate such an emergency response and shutting everybody down if this has been going on for a long time and things have not substantially changed? That's an issue that I would have a lot of concern with. That is no reason to summarily stop access to the database through the other agencies. He said that no public safety concerns were there. He would like to hear specific concerns as far as that goes. And I'm just going to throw out a scenario on that. Because of the information that you've heard is critical as far as the responding officers in the field having sufficient information when they respond for safety reasons, not only for themselves, but also for the public. For instance, a officer is going out to serve a search warrant one morning, and it's a routine search warrant on the face of it. It's located on the street across from a school, and he goes out to serve the search warrant with no other information available to him. If he had access to go into RIMS to check for information on the person and location where he's going to serve the search warrant, and found out that the person was known to have firearms and had been rather hostile in the past and perhaps would not be willing to go easily if a search warrant and an arrest warrant were served, that would be critical information so that the officer could prepare properly, even if it meant to served a search warrant at a time when children were not present around the school, and if necessary, depending upon information, they may want to also evacuate the houses around in case the situation became very drastic to where they could be involved in shots fired. He says providing services for the contract were done. The cooperation must go beyond having the minimum basis of the contract satisfied. The contract should be looked at as a guideline for providing a service, not that that is the bare essentials that you should ever provide. It said all of the agencies were utilizing the RIMS as an investigative tool. Certainly, that is a benefit to all law enforcement agencies, and the sheriff must be a resource for all of the law enforcement agencies in the county. The sheriff's office is the largest law enforcement jurisdiction within a county and must provide resources to the other allied agencies. In doing so, the RIMS is a very valuable tool that the sheriff can provide for the other agencies. He also said that he had researched the penal code last night for violations. Why is it that the drastic actions were taken and then the penal code was later reviewed? I would have done it the opposite, as I believe that most would, that you would find the circumstances and facts before you take the actions, not take the action and then go out and try to find the reason why you took it. He also says that it wasn't appropriate for Lakeport Police Department to access the RIMS, but it has been allowed for 2.5 years while he was the sheriff. Why is it that such drastic action was taken without some consensus and cooperation and working with the department heads from the agencies prior to that to try to resolve any issues? Now, we've talked a lot as far as the access that the agencies have to the RIMS system. And the RIMS system, and I'm familiar with it, Chief Clausen, it was November of 2006 when Clear Lake Police Department actually went online with it. The RIMS system has several different security levels for access to it, which can be instituted by individual basis. And that's probably the proper procedure in utilizing the RIMS system. Let's remember that RIMS is just a software system. There's a lot of other companies out there that provide the same or similar software systems. So when we talk about RIMS, this is not a unique system through the Department of Justice.
How much more do you have?
Really?
Very shortly, otherwise my wife's going to start hitting me.
Supervisor Constant's going to have to leave, and we need to get this wrapped up.
I believe it would be best at this point that they entertain an idea that could be put in front of him. And I'll make 3 suggestions on that. I would make a suggestion that immediately the system be restored to the way that it was, that the sheriff work with the department heads to have a mutual agreement, understanding between them for future use of the database system, and that they set access levels that are responsive to the security of the system, yet allows for the best use of all information for public and officer safety. And with that, I won't take any more time. Yep, sorry.
My name is Roger Shuto, and I base my experience on 30 years as a chief or under sheriff. My number 1 concern is officer safety. I've had an officer shot. I think that we should make every effort that we can to give the officer on the street every edge. and RIMS is a very important tool. This can be resolved if the sheriff would just make a decision to go back the way it was, and at the same time make a good faith effort to resolve this problem, which is all the Department of Justice requires. Get our team together of chiefs and make a good faith effort to finish the audit, correct the problems, and to move on. I've had to make these decisions before, and I've worked with the state, and they're clear about that. They want a plan, and they want a good faith effort. But we must give the tools that our officers on the street need. That's critical. And in closing, I recently had a unit that was a special investigations unit in Sonoma County that we did warrantless searches almost every day, and we needed RIMS. Probation department always updated address and information, and our officers were away from the other county offices. So this tool is critical to the day-to-day efforts of our law enforcement people. That has to be a priority. And again, until you've had an officer shot, and we have in this county, we've got to consider public safety number first. Do the audit, get back to business, and put a good faith plan together, and you can do it, and the sheriff can do it with that plan. Thank you.
My name is Walter Patty. I'm a retired police chief, and I'll be very, very brief. I support the point of sharing information at all levels. It is in the best interest of law enforcement and the communities that they serve. In fact, with the two proposals that were mentioned here, I totally agree with as well, that they should sit down together across from the table, not exchanging emails or telephone calls, and come to some resolution on this. Because one of the most important things in law enforcement is the sharing of information and collaboration. And apparently, from what I'm seeing here, that's not being done at the moment. And the best example of sharing information and collaboration in my 79 years on this earth has been in the bombing in Boston, where federal agencies, all federal agencies, right down to local law enforcement, collaborated very, very closely in bringing the incident to an arrest situation. And it's a good example of how sharing of information and collaboration works. And I would hope that the presentation or the proposal that was made, that they do sit down across from the table and come to resolution on this. Information sharing is the best protective measure you can take for a citizen. Thank
you. My name is Hiram Dukes. I was a paramedic in Humboldt County. I worked with the sheriff. If you want to see his statue, go up there at the courthouse and look at it. It's in bronze, him laying in the gutter bleeding to death. He had the most up-to-date information given him, and he died. We had another call that year of 2 people screaming. We got there, 27 people were dead, 1 homicide. This is not a miracle cure. There is nothing in this whole world that's going to replace a smart, alert, and well-trained police officer. Thank you.
Marcy Long, Kelseyville. I have 4 points. The first one is that you guys, the Board of Supervisors, you need to follow the law. And as Terry Larson pointed out, there are laws regarding access to RIMS, and I wish you would inform yourselves of it. Number 2, I feel that this is a bunch of sour grapes. The people that didn't like Frank getting elected sheriff went to the probation department. There's a lot of people that are not cooperating with Frank, and they're trying to make it as difficult as possible. And I think calling this meeting today, point number 3, why would you do something so important with 2 members absent? This is ridiculous. And the last point is, there's a system in place already. So why do you want to reinvent something when they already have an interoperating system that allows access to information? And if you need more information, as Sheriff Rivero said, you ask for it. Just because you've had something in the past illegally doesn't mean you have a right to have it illegally now.
Very good. Any last members of the public? All right, I'm going to close public and bring it back to the board. And actually, I would like to turn to County Council at this moment and ask a couple questions. First is, what actions, County Council, what do you see as possible actions that the board could take, given that Sheriff Rivero is a constitutional officer and we have the contract with the county?
All right, I'm going to go through a few things. I'll try to go through in recognition of Supervisor Costa. Microphone as quickly as possible. Number 1, the agreement with Sunridge Systems, or the RIM system, is by and between the County of Lake and Sunridge. And it is for records management and jail management software to assist in managing the Sheriff's Department. So there's nothing in the county's agreement with Sunridge that contemplates the type of cooperation that has gone on for years among all of the various law enforcement agencies. So that document does not do very much in terms of the county's ability to change things. Now, of course, the county has its own entitlements and authority under the terms of this contract to change the terms. But you also must keep in mind that the control of the Sheriff's Department information, the Sheriff's information he maintains through this RIM system, is the Sheriff's Department's. And Government Code 25303 that allows your board to supervise the conduct of all county officers still says very clearly that the section cannot be construed to affect the independent and constitutionally and statutorily designated investigative and prosecutorial functions of the sheriff and district attorney of the county. The board shall not obstruct the investigative function of the sheriff of the county, nor shall it obstruct the investigative and prosecutorial function of the district attorney of the county. So under the terms of state law, you are somewhat hamstrung as to what you can do with regard to accessing Sheriff's Department information. That also impacts any call for some independent audit, because without the sheriff's approval and permission, your board has no independent authority to audit what is under the Penal Code 33100, 13300 etc. Not available to you specifically. Now, under the California Constitution, Article 5, Section 13 provides that, subject to the powers and duties of the governor, the Attorney General shall be the chief law enforcement officer of the state. It shall be the duty of the Attorney General to see that the laws of the state are uniformly and adequately enforced. The Attorney General shall have direct supervision over every district attorney and sheriff. So the Attorney General does have. Now, I should say that both state and federal courts have looked at this issue. And even though you can't intrude upon, you can't obstruct the sheriff in terms of his law enforcement functions, his investigative and prosecutorial functions, you are still entitled to do what you did today, which is review and ask questions. And you're doing that on the basis of attempting to ensure public safety. Some of the things that you can do consequent to that review is develop some type of a task force or a committee or some type of a mechanism to try to work with all law enforcement agencies. The one thing I did hear from all of the law enforcement agencies and from some of the people who were former law enforcement officers who came to speak today is that there does have to be that spirit of cooperation. I would suggest that perhaps no greater than in terms of working out an agreement. The sheriff has said that he has concerns about information security. The police department for the city of Lakeport, probation department are concerned about officer security, the efficiency of law enforcement operations, officer safety. all of those issues. All of them are huge issues, and everyone needs to be able to voice those at the table. I would suggest that perhaps the Board of Supervisors might want to have one member of the Board of Supervisors participate. We'll invite the city, and to do it very quickly. As I said, since Sheriff Rivero said several times that he was amenable to that, the Lakeport Police Chief has said he is amenable to that, Probation Chief is amenable to that. It might be a good idea to strike while the iron is hot. As far as any suspected misuse or allegations of misuse, you have here the district attorney and the chief law enforcement official of the county, who is Sheriff Rivero. And certainly they know who has direct supervision over them. So if there is something that is criminal of nature, it would, as they both can tell you, behoove them to request the Attorney General to conduct an investigation into that. Your board can request it, but you do not work for the Attorney General any more than I do. So it would be no different than a public request. The sheriff and or DA, or they could call for it jointly, or perhaps all the law enforcement agencies would like to call for one, just to put all of this to rest. The one final thing I would note is with regard to the contract with the investigative service from 2 years ago, and Sheriff Rivero is right here, and I have no doubt he will not say otherwise. Sheriff Rivero secured the services of that company. I had never heard of them before. The initial agreement was a letter agreement that described the scope of work. I'm sure a Public Records Act request to the Sheriff's Department, or perhaps the auditor controller, would disclose that particular information. And your board may recall that when the Sheriff's Department went over the $10,000 limit, the Sheriff's Department had to come to your board to ratify, essentially, further action, further investigative action that was done. I can also tell you that that was a multi-part report. It involved not just RIMS, but also the issue, because the sheriff was concerned about some bad information that he felt was getting out about some of his law enforcement functions regarding an operation of the Sheriff's Department in Clear Lake and a potential operation involving the Hells Angels. I think, and I may be incorrect about this, but the reason it went through my office was because the sheriff received a recommendation from the investigators, since oftentimes things in those reports contain confidential information or could impact the privacy rights of individuals, particularly criminal defendants. And that was the case in this situation. So I didn't perform those redactions. But as I said, this was not an investigation. Number one, I have no authority. If anyone in this county is unclear about anything, they should be clear on this. I have no authority over elected officials.
I wish you did.
Give us the look occasionally.
So I guess at this point, I would like to ask the sheriff a couple of questions. One is, Sheriff, are you open to, first of all, I guess I'll just ask point blank, are you open to opening the system as it was and rapidly putting processes in place with a task force of some kind in a spirit of cooperation? And then making the adjustments after that. My question is, there seems to be some real concerns about officer safety among these various agencies, and they seem to have access to a system that by tradition they've had access, not necessarily by specific statements in a contract, right? So they've had access to RIMS. And my question is, it seems to me you need to get that under control, and those are the reasons you took the actions you did. I'm wondering if there is a way to form a committee of the appropriate parties to, in a spirit of cooperation, come up with protocols for either access or access to the information and maybe not access to RIMS. But in the meantime, while that's being developed, restore the access to these departments so they have what they need right now.
First of all, the access, let's just be real clear about this. The access to probation can be restored right now. Mr. Howell cares to tell me who he wants to have access, so that's not a problem.
That's a conversation between the two.
Well, I mean, I've sent several emails out and I keep getting the same answer, which is I want everybody restored. So if he wants to have the information restored, that's fine, and we've also offered to input the probation information ourselves into RIMS. concerning Lakeport Police, the answer is no. For the simple reason that subsequent to my actions, I found that there had been abuse. And I'm not going to go back knowing that there's this abuse and just say I'm going to trust again. I won't do that.
So the follow-up question I have is, are you open? I mean, the board could certainly ask the Attorney General to conduct an audit, and perhaps we should, but it would come with a lot more weight if it came from the various law enforcement agencies in our county. So is it possible, since there has, in your view, there's been abuse, can we ask for an independent audit of the system?
Well, first, I believe the county council said that the board cannot, but setting that aside, I'd be happy to join the district attorney's office in requesting the attorney general to step in and do a complete audit. That would be very favorable in my view, and I'd like to move forward with it as soon as possible.
Yeah, so you could,
Yes, here, here.
You have to answer.
Well, I want to join the district attorney and ask, I want the district attorney to join me in asking, because the district attorney in that last investigation refused to allow his district attorney investigators to talk to the investigators. So it's an exercise in futility if I don't have the cooperation of the district attorney.
It seems to me the Attorney General can compel that, right?
Possibly.
So if really what you need.
Well, if you're talking about, Constitution, you have the Fifth Amendment right to not self-incriminate, so you could compel, but refuse to testify. In this particular case, it was just not required of the department head.
But you've answered the question. I think you've answered my question, which is you're open to asking for the Attorney General to send in, to conduct an independent audit.
I'm more than open. I welcome it. I invite it.
Okay. All right. Anita, can the board request that of the sheriff and the DA that they go ahead? We can make that request, can't we?
Make the request, you can't require.
Obviously, we can't require it, but we can make the request, and that may be an appropriate action for us to take. How about, Sheriff Rivera, how about the task force committee concept that's been floated here? Are you open to?
I'm always open to talking to anyone.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So, board members.
Well, Madam Chair, I request that we ask the sheriff and I need to invite the Attorney General to this audit, and that we establish a task force with all of the agencies involved with a board member sitting on it if necessary.
I agree with that, but I'd like to answer, go back to, Marcy asked the question, why are we here with only 3 board members and not all of them? The reason is 2 of them are going to be out of town. There's no board meeting next week, and this is something that needs to be dealt with now, in my opinion. And I can guarantee you that those other 2 board members are equally interested in having, just based on the work that I've done with them over the last 12 years or so, they're just as interested as we are in making sure that these other law enforcement agencies have access to the information needed to protect the public and themselves. So I would have been happy to have all of them here, but they're out of town for whatever reason, for their own personal reasons, and we don't have a board meeting this next week. So that's the reason we're doing this now. It's unfortunate that we can't, I don't believe that there's some word games being played here. Abuses, inappropriate activity, illegal activity, nonsense. There's stuff that's going on that is out of the control of the sheriff, and that's what this is really about control. It's unfortunate that we've even come to this, but we have an obligation, even though the city of Lakeport is not under our jurisdiction, they are our responsibility, just like any other citizen in this county, to make sure that they're protected and they have the tools they need to make sure they can do their jobs effectively. Our law enforcement has always historically had a good relationship because we're limited in our resources. We're not San Francisco where the sheriff calls home where it came from. We are a very rural county with very limited resources. We have to use the SO, probation, LPD, CPD, CHP, parole, fish and game, parks. I saw parks represented here. We use every resource that we can to make sure that citizens are safe here. We've had our differences with both cities on some issues. We've hashed things out over South Main, over jobs lost, things like that. But when it comes to public safety, we have to remain united. We cannot turn this into a contest of who's, you know what is bigger than whose. Apparently we win. So with that, I think we need to move forward with this request for investigation and audit into this, and let's do what we can to restore, get the tools back in place that we need to protect our citizens.
The one thing, Madam Chair, I would should be prepared that the city of Lakeport has indicated that we may file legal action under the statute.
Can't hear you.
The city of Lakeport has at least intimated that they would file legal action to enforce their interpretation of the dispatch. So I just wanted to be sure.
Well, given that we don't have anything else,
in regards to two supervisors not being here, Supervisor Smith is out of town, Supervisor Farrington's getting married. Supervisor Smith had called me 10 minutes after 10. I have no idea what that's about, but I'm unable to communicate with him until this is over. So they'd be here if they could. We didn't choose to do this without him. This came up after we were already not going to be meeting next week.
So, as I see it, we can do three things. One is we can ask the sheriff and the DA, and potentially the probation department, I guess, to invite the AG to begin a RIMS audit. Second is that we can ask the sheriff, DA, to participate in a task force with the chief of the Lakeport Police Department, and the chief of Clear Lake Police Department, and a board member. Can we order a task force, or can we just ask?
You can create the
create a task force.
What I'd suggest you may want to do is you can ask the sheriff if he would be willing to contact all of the law enforcement agencies and allow a board member to participate.
Okay, so that would be the first step.
You can create your own, of course, also, but when you're bringing in entities
what's the point?
outside,
Yeah.
the problem is time, because one of the things that we're hearing from the city of Lakeport is time is of the essence. So it would be a good idea to try to hash this out quickly.
Well, and then the third thing that we can do is we can make a request of the sheriff, and he can say no, right? So we can do that for both the task force or the discussion group, and we can do that for asking the sheriff to restore access to RIMS temporarily until the protocols are worked out. Yeah, I mean, for my, and I'm not sure what I'm hearing from the other board members, but for my part, I would say, number one, as a board, I think we should request the sheriff and the DA, ask them to invite the AG to begin an independent audit of the RIMS access. Second, is I would ask the sheriff and the DA and the probation department, along with the chiefs of the Lakeport PD and the Clear Lake PD, participate in a discussion group with at least one board member on resolving data access to RIMS. And then the third thing is I would request of the sheriff, and it's his decision obviously, but I would request of the sheriff that he temporarily restore access as it was until this is resolved.
Supervisor Franklin, did you also want to put a time of the essence statement?
Well, obviously, I mean, I could say time is of the essence. Here's another problem. I'm gone next week. So if it's another board member, we need to, if it's me, I would have to do it the week after. If it's another board member, we'd have to discuss that.
Supervisor Smith is back.
Okay, Supervisor Smith.
Plus he's involved in the Chiefs.
So we can vote to see time here.
You can bind him to anything.
All board.
All right.
Madam Chair, if I may, I totally concur with what you said. With one addition, we have another major law enforcement entity here in the county that's not been mentioned that should be included in that task force, and that's the CHP. I think that it's very important that they be included. But they should be, but but I think it's quite important. They're not going to do that. That was probably poor choice of words, but I believe it would be very important for them to be involved as the sharing of information. Certainly needs to include that.
From a wording standpoint, County Council, is the word task force correct, or is it discussion group?
I think the whole point is just to arrange a meeting of all of these minds in order to effectually get a quick result. If everyone is truly willing to work this out, as long as their concerns are respected, then it should be able to happen in short order.
Well, Madam Chair, I would move that the aforementioned conditions, that we put those in the form of a motion as I propose it, and that we,
Me to send the letter indicating your
yes,
desires.
the county council would draft a letter on behalf, and that we appoint Chairman Jeff Smith to be the board representative. Can we include that in the same motion? Okay. That is the motion, Madam Chair.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. I'm going to clarify what the motion is. First, that we're asking the sheriff and the DA to invite the Attorney General to begin an independent RIMS access audit. Second, that we are creating a discussion group of the law enforcement entities in Lake County and include Supervisor Smith as a member of that group to resolve any protocol issues in terms of information access to RIMS. And third is that we're requesting the sheriff grant access to RIMS at his option while this is happening so that law enforcement safety is preserved as this process is underway.
That perfectly states the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.